Even before we entered the woods, I felt like something in there already knew our names. It was the Thursday before Easter. My aunt's house sat at the edge of a dense stretch of forest in northern Pennsylvania, the kind of place where pine needles mute every footstep and trees lean close enough to block the sky. My family used to spend every holiday there, a tradition that faded after my uncle passed, but that year, for some reason, we returned. I was 16. Old enough to notice when something felt off, but still too young to be taken seriously when I said it out loud. It started with the backyard, not the porch or the garden or the patchy lawn, but beyond that. At the tree line, there was a narrow break in the brush where two wooden posts stood like forgotten signposts. I'd never noticed them before, but maybe I just hadn't paid attention. They were weathered, gray, and had faint carvings, symbols, or letters. It was hard to tell. One of them had what looked like a child's handprint in faded red paint. When I asked my aunt about them, she looked at me too long before saying, "That's just the old trail. Don't go back there. It floods this time of year." She was lying. Or not lying exactly, just avoiding something. The first strange thing happened that night. I couldn't sleep. I wasn't sure why, but the house felt wrong. Like it wasn't entirely empty even when everyone was asleep. I lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling, listening to the ticking of the hallway clock when I heard it faint tapping. It wasn't rhythmic like a drip or a creak, but slow, deliberate. Tap, tap, pause, tap. It was coming from beneath me. The basement. I didn't move. I just stared at the wall, holding my breath like a kid scared of the dark again. Eventually, it stopped. Or maybe I fell asleep. Either way, by morning I convinced myself it was just the old house settling. The next day was Good Friday. Cold and overcast. My cousin Alex and I were sent outside to get some air, which really meant get out of the adult's hair. He was younger than me, but we got along well enough. I told him about the tapping sound from the night before, and without missing a beat, he said, "It's the Easter man." He said it like it was common knowledge. Like the Tooth Fairy or Santa. The what? The Easter man, he repeated, a little quieter this time. He lives back in the woods. In the ground, I think. He watches people who come back there before Easter. If he likes you, he leaves something for you. And if he doesn't like you? Alex shrugged. Then you hear tapping. I laughed, but it wasn't real. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't trying to scare me. That was the unsettling part. He said it like he believed it. Like someone had told him this and not recently. We didn't talk about it again. Later that afternoon, I wandered to the edge of the yard, drawn to the strange posts. I felt stupid doing it, but I stepped between them and into the woods, following what looked like the faint remains of a trail. It wasn't much, just a slight depression in the pine needles, like something heavy had passed through there a long time ago. Trees closed in quickly and the silence became thick. I only meant to go a few yards in, but I walked farther than I realized. And that's when I saw them. For ahead, through the trees' faint, flickering lights. Orange like torches. Not flashlights. Not lanterns. They moved slowly. Deliberately. And worse, I heard something. Low and distant. Not words exactly, but something like chanting. I turned and walked back toward the house. But the posts weren't where I thought they'd be. And the tapping started again. Only this time, it was coming from behind the trees. I told myself I hadn't gone far. Maybe 50 yards. Maybe less. But when I turned around to go back, the forest felt different. Heavier. The trees were closer together, like they'd shifted in the time I was standing still. The path I thought I was following, if it ever really was a path, was gone. I tried to walk in the direction I came from, but the woods had a way of confusing your sense of direction. Every few steps, I'd stop and listen. Nothing. Not birds, not wind, not even the distant sounds of the house. Just the memory of chanting and the tapping still echoing in my head. I turned to check behind me again, and that's when I saw it. A shape maybe 30 feet back, standing between two trees. Tall, unmoving, wearing something pale, almost white. At first, I thought it might be a hiker, or a scarecrow someone left out as a joke. But then it took a step. I didn't scream. I just ran. Branches scratched at my arms. Something tugged at my jacket like a thorn or a snag of wire, but I didn't look back. I ran until I burst out of the woods, panting, heart pounding in my throat. The posts were there. Only they were different. They looked newer, cleaner, like they'd just been cut. The symbols were gone. And instead of a handprint, one of them had a length of twine nailed to it, the kind you'd use to hang something, maybe. But there was nothing on the end of it. By the time I reached the back porch, I could still feel eyes on me. I didn't go inside right away. I just stood there, staring at the woods, waiting for something to come out. Nothing did. That night at dinner, no one said much. The house had a weird energy, too quiet, too polite, like everyone was trying not to acknowledge something. My aunt kept glancing at the window behind me like she expected someone to be standing there. After dinner, I found my way to the basement. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove to myself the tapping had just been old pipes or rats in the walls. I took the narrow staircase down, flipping on the single bulb overhead. The basement was a mess of storage bins, old tools, and boxes that hadn't been opened in years. The air was cold, thick with mildew and rust. I didn't hear tapping this time, but I did find something I wish I hadn't. Against the far wall, under a dust-covered sheet, was a wooden cross. Not the decorative kind. It was crude, two beams bound with twine, smeared with old, dark stains. At its base, a pile of dried moss, feathers, and cracked brown eggshells had been arranged into a small, circular nest. My chest tightened. I stood frozen, not sure if I'd stumbled into some forgotten Easter decoration or an altar. Then something creaked behind me. I turned slowly. No one was there, but the light bulb overhead flickered once, then went out. I backed up fast, fumbling for the stairs in the dark. When I reached the top, the door was open. I didn't remember leaving it that way. As I closed it, I noticed something etched into the inside of the basement door, carved deep into the wood like it had been scratched in with a nail or knife. He sees who steps between the posts. I didn't sleep that night. I kept waiting for the tapping to start again, but the house stayed silent. And somehow that was worse. It felt like the quiet was watching me, like something had moved inside it. Around 3 a.m., I finally pulled the blankets off and crept to the hallway. My bedroom door looked darker than it should have, like the shadows on the other side were thicker than normal. I stepped out and nearly tripped over something. A basket. Small, wicker, with a curved handle and that fake green Easter grass inside. Sitting right outside my door like a kid had left it during a game. Only it wasn't candy inside, just three things: a cracked brown eggshell, a strip of what looked like denim fabric, and a folded piece of lined paper. The note just said, "You stepped between the posts." That was it. No explanation. No name. No signature. I didn't show it to anyone. I don't know why. I just took the basket and stuffed it under my bed like hiding it would somehow undo the whole thing. The next day, everything felt more fragile. Like the house was balancing on something I couldn't see. I barely spoke at breakfast. My aunt asked if I'd been sleeping okay, and when I hesitated, she didn't press. She just nodded like she already knew. Later that morning, I was helping Alex look for the plastic eggs my aunt had scattered in the front yard for his practice hunt. He picked one up and turned to me with a serious look on his face. "They're not allowed past the line," he said. "What?" "The people with the lights," he answered, cracking the plastic egg open. "The torches." He said it so casually, like it was a game he understood and I didn't. I didn't even know how to respond. I just stood there, heart starting to race in my chest. "What line?" "The one in the woods. That's why they need us to come to them." I stared at him, unsure what to say. He smiled a little and ran off to find the next egg. That afternoon, I went back to the woods. I shouldn't have. Every part of me knew it was a mistake, but something in me had to know if what I saw had been real. If the flickering lights were still there. I waited until the others were inside getting ready for dinner. Slipped through the backyard. Passed between the posts. The air felt different again. The quiet wasn't peaceful. It was full of weight. The trail looked the same at first, but about 30 feet in, I found something new, a second set of posts. Thinner. Sharper. They looked newer. They were arranged in an arch barely taller than me, and the ground beneath them was bare, like nothing had dared grow there in a long time. Just beyond them, I saw movement. A figure. Not far. Pale clothing. A basket in one hand. They were facing away, but the moment I saw them, they turned toward me, slow and fluid, like they'd been waiting for me to catch up. Only it wasn't a person. Not really. It wore something like a rabbit mask, old, handmade, maybe leather or papier-mâché, stained dark around the mouth. Long, rigid ears. Black holes for eyes. And behind it, deeper in the trees, were more figures. 5. Maybe 6. Holding torches that didn't flicker, didn't move with the wind. Just steady orange lights in the dark. They didn't speak. They didn't move toward me. They waited. I backed away, heart hammering, whispering "no, no, no" under my breath like a prayer. I stumbled once on a root, caught myself, and ran until the trees gave way to lawn again. I didn't go inside right away. I sat on the back porch and stared into the woods, knowing I wasn't just being watched. I was being invited. That night, there was a storm. It started with soft thunder far off in the hills, then rolled in slow, heavy rain tapping against the roof, wind making the upstairs windows rattle. But I barely noticed. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen in the woods. The rabbit mask. The torches. The way they stood there, not chasing me, not threatening, just watching. Waiting. Like a church congregation watching a latecomer walk in. I didn't tell anyone. I tried once. After dinner, I caught my aunt in the kitchen alone, drying silverware by the sink. I stood there for a minute trying to find the words. When she looked up at me, I think she knew what I was about to say. She shook her head slowly. "Don't give it your voice," she said. That's all. She didn't ask what I saw. She didn't act confused or concerned. She just went back to drying the fork in her hand like she'd said something final. I didn't sleep. Again. Around 2 a.m. I got up and wandered the house. Everything creaked, old floorboards, the wood frame shifting with the wind. I don't know why, but I ended up in the basement again. The door was unlocked. I opened it and stepped down into the dark. No lights this time, the bulb overhead was still dead, and I hadn't thought to grab a flashlight. I used my phone screen to guide the way, the dim glow painting the basement in pale blue shadows. The cross was still there. But something had changed. The eggshells in the nest were gone. In their place were teeth. Small. Too small to be animal. Just a tiny pile of off-white enamel laid out carefully in a circle, each one pointing inward. I turned to go, and that's when I saw her. At the far corner of the basement, just beyond the edge of my phone's glow, a figure stood. I couldn't make out her face, but I could tell she was barefoot. Her dress was soaked, hanging heavy like she'd just stepped out of a lake. And in her hands she held an Easter basket. Same kind as the one outside my room. I didn't speak. I couldn't. She raised one hand slowly, pointing not at me, but toward the ceiling. Toward the house. And then she vanished. No sound. No flicker. Just gone. I bolted up the stairs 2 at a time and slammed the door behind me, breathing hard, heart pounding like it was trying to escape. As I stood there in the dark hallway, I realized something that turned my blood to ice. The tapping wasn't gone. It had moved. Now it was coming from upstairs. From the attic. I didn't know what to do. Every instinct said to run. Leave. But the house felt wrapped around me like it had grown teeth and was waiting for me to struggle. I crept back to my room and shut the door. I barely slept. When I woke up the next morning, Easter Sunday, there was something at the foot of my bed. A second basket. This one held only one thing. A single brown egg. It was warm. And it was shaking. I didn't touch the egg. I couldn't. It sat at the foot of my bed, resting in that mess of green plastic grass, vibrating softly like something inside was trying to get out or wake up. I sat frozen for what felt like hours, just staring at it. My fingers itched to pick it up, but something deep in me, something old, told me not to. I wasn't supposed to. Not yet. When I finally left my room, the house was too quiet again. My parents were still asleep. Or pretending to be. And the only sound I could hear was the wind brushing against the windows. The storm had passed. The sky outside was pale and colorless. Easter morning. By noon, my aunt was putting on her usual act, dressing the table, arranging dyed eggs in a porcelain bowl, humming old hymns under her breath like nothing was wrong. My cousin Alex was already outside, hopping around the yard in a pair of rubber boots, his little basket swinging from one arm. I watched him from the kitchen window. That's when I saw it. At the edge of the woods, between the trees, the same rabbit-masked figure. Just standing there, watching. Only this time it wasn't alone. 2 others stood with it. One taller, one hunched. Both with pale masks, different shapes. One had horns like a ram. The other a long narrow snout like a fox. Their torches weren't lit. They weren't holding anything. They were just waiting. I ran outside, yelling for Alex. He didn't hear me at first. Or maybe he did and ignored me. He stood facing the tree line, basket dangling from one hand, staring into the woods like he could hear someone calling. "Alex!" I shouted again, louder this time. He turned, startled, and blinked at me like he'd been sleepwalking. "They want us to follow," he said, quiet. I grabbed his arm and pulled him back toward the house. "You don't go near the woods ever. Understand?" He nodded once, but his eyes drifted back to the trees. Later, while everyone was gathered in the dining room, I slipped away. I had to see. I had to know. Something in that second basket was still moving, and I knew it wouldn't wait forever. I went back to my room. The basket was gone. The green grass was scattered across the floor like it had been torn out in a hurry. The window was open. There were muddy footprints on the carpet. Small ones. Too small to be mine. I followed them through the hallway down the stairs toward the basement door. The door was open. I called for my aunt, my mom, anyone, but no one answered. I couldn't even hear voices in the kitchen. Like the house had swallowed them. I stepped into the basement. At the bottom of the stairs, someone had drawn a circle in ash around the wooden cross. Inside it were 5 eggs, each cracked open at the top. Thin wisps of smoke drifted out from them, slow, curling like breath in cold air. And in the far corner of the basement, crouched low to the ground, was a figure. Small, dressed in white. It's back to me. It was holding something in its hands. I took one step closer and the floor creaked beneath me. The figure turned. It was a child. A boy. Hair matted, skin gray and tight, like he hadn't eaten in years. His eyes were solid black. Empty. And around his neck was a length of twine. The same kind I'd seen on the forest post. He opened his mouth too wide and in a voice that wasn't a child's, he whispered, "Your place is ready." I didn't move. Couldn't. The boy's voice, that thing in the basement wearing the shape of a boy, wasn't just deep, it was layered. Like more than one voice had spoken at once. One behind his words. One beneath his skin. Something older. Something dry and hollow, like wind whistling through a grave. "Your place is ready," he'd said. I backed away slowly, one step at a time, the basement floor groaning beneath me. He didn't follow. He didn't have to. He just stared up at me, eyes black and shining like oil, and I swear he smiled. By the time I got back upstairs, the house felt different. The front door was wide open. The wind had picked up again. And something was missing, not something physical, but something in the air. It was like the house had been emptied out of warmth. The silence was no longer just quiet. It was hollow, echoing. I walked room to room. No one. No mom. No dad. No aunt. No Alex. At the far end of the hallway, I found something that made my stomach twist, a trail of those plastic Easter eggs. One cracked open. Then another. A third one split cleanly down the middle, its shell smeared with something dark. Not blood. Not paint. Something older. Thicker. Like rot. I followed them. Through the kitchen. Out the back door. And into the woods. I don't know why I didn't just run. Maybe part of me thought I'd find them. Maybe part of me already knew I wouldn't. The trail wound deeper than I'd ever gone before. The air smelled like wet bark and burnt wax. Eventually, the trees thinned and I stepped into a small clearing. Perfect circle. Mud packed hard beneath my shoes. No birds. No insects. Just the distant sound of something scraping. They were there. Not my family, the others. 7 of them. Each wore a mask, not store-bought, not costume. Handmade. Organic. Bone, wood, twine. Hollow eyes and animal shapes. One held a shepherd's crook. Another had a wreath of feathers and dried grass. They stood in a semicircle around an old tree, its bark pale and peeling, a wooden cross nailed crooked to the trunk. At the base of the tree was a shallow pit half filled with water. Inside the water, barely visible through the murk, were the baskets. Dozens of them. Wicker. Drenched. Sinking. Some were empty. Some weren't. I stepped closer, trembling, and one of the masked figures raised their hand, not to stop me, not to threaten, but to welcome. They thought I belonged there. One stepped forward. A tall man with a goat-like mask and long, thin fingers. He carried something wrapped in cloth. He knelt and placed it at my feet. Then he stepped back. I looked down. The cloth unwrapped itself or was pulled by something beneath it. Inside was a third basket, one I hadn't seen before. Inside this one were 3 things. A small, rusted key, a Polaroid photo of the basement altar, and a length of twine. I didn't want to touch any of it, but I knew if I ran, they wouldn't chase me. They wouldn't need to, because I had already stepped between the posts. Because the tapping had moved into the walls now. Because I had accepted the first gift. And that's when I heard it again, the child's voice, whispering not from the woods, but from just behind me. He only needs one more. I turned around, but there was no one there. No child. No voice. Just the wind brushing through the trees in a way that almost sounded like breathing. Still, I knew what I heard. He only needs one more. One more what? I picked up the basket slowly, like it might burn me, and the second my fingers touched it, the forest changed. The masked figures vanished. Not walked away. Not fled. Just blinked out. Like they'd never been there. The woods were dead quiet. The pit at the base of the tree was gone as if it had never existed. The cross, the altar, all of it disappeared. The clearing was just dirt and moss again. No signs of ritual. No symbols. Just me, holding the basket. I don't remember walking back. Just the feeling of moss underfoot and a strange stillness pressing in around me. The kind of quiet that builds pressure in your ears like you're sinking underwater. When I stepped out of the trees, the house looked untouched. Lights on. Dinner dishes still drying on the counter. Except no one was there. My parents' coats still hung by the door. My aunt's purse sat open on the table. Alex's rubber boots leaned beside the fireplace caked in dried mud. I searched the whole house. Every room. Every closet. Nothing. No sign of them leaving. No packed bags. No tire tracks in the gravel. Just silence. I don't remember falling asleep, but I woke up on the couch sometime after dark, the basket still in my lap. The key was cold. The photo damp. The twine was gone. I checked the basement first. The bulb had been replaced. It flicked on when I pulled the chain. The floor was clean. No cross. No circle. No cracked eggs. Just storage boxes, a folded tarp, and a box fan humming softly in the corner. And yet, when I walked to the far wall, I found a new door. I had never seen it before. It was narrow, just slightly wider than my shoulders, and it looked older than the house itself, thick, dark wood with a keyhole right in the center. The key from the basket fit perfectly. But I didn't turn it. I left it in place and backed up the stairs, heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. By morning, the basket was gone. So was the key. So was the door. I swear it was there. No one believed me when I called. My uncle picked up, the one who hadn't visited in years, and he just said, "You must have dreamed it. They're not at the house." "But there's stuff," I started, but he cut me off. "There's nothing in that house," he said. "It's been empty since Ruth moved out after the funeral." "But I was just there yesterday." There was a long pause on the line. Then he asked, carefully, "Do you remember what happened to Alex?" I did. Or at least I thought I did. But in that moment, the memory was like a photograph left in the sun too long. Faded. Curled at the edges. I hung up without answering. That was 6 years ago. Sometimes, around Easter, I still hear the tapping. Not in the walls. Not under the floor. In my dreams. And always, just before I wake, I hear it again, that dry, layered voice whispering. "You stepped between the posts." And worse. I think I left the door unlocked.